So we now turn to Aristotle himself and to his conviction that nature does nothing without purpose. I'd like to invite our moderator, Professor Spyridon Rangos, Professor of Ancient Greek Literature and Philosophy at the University of Patras, to take his seat and introduce to this panel speakers. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to invite Stasinos. Let me see. I would like to see the. Stasinos Stavrianeas, who's an assistant professor. Okay, it's the other way around, but anyway, an assistant professor in the Hellenic Open University, as well as Evangelos Protopapadakis. Where is Evangelos? Who is a professor at the National Kapodistrian University of Athens, and also the director of a practical philosophy research laboratory. Now, the title of this panel is a famous maxim by Aristotle, namely, nature does nothing in vain. This is a maxim that is repeated in several places of his corpus, and it permeates, in a way, his natural philosophy. And we are going to focus on that concept. But before that, I would like to make a short introduction about the fundamental cosmocentric philosophy developed in ancient Greek prior to Aristotle already. And I would like to make sure that from the very beginning of philosophy, the beginning of philosophy dates back to the early 6th century, according to a narrative that is the narrative that we still follow, and this is the narrative that goes back to Aristotle himself about the beginning of philosophy. The beginning of philosophy with an experience of wonder, and the first people who did philosophize were those that were, in a way, had this experience of being perplexed and astonished in front of being and the cosmos as a whole. Now, from the early 6th century, when philosophy develops, the basic idea is that we need, as philosophers, to understand the unity of the world. So the primary idea, the primary question is the unity of the world, what makes the world one unified whole. And the first philosophers were basically trying to deal with that question by postulating a first principle, a first substance like water or air or the unbound, which is itself alive. So the first thing that I would like to underline is that the notion of life already in early Greek philosophy is primitive. We tend to underline that those philosophers placed a great deal of emphasis on the notion of nature and the notion of cosmos, order or arrangement. But we tend to forget that they also played a great deal of emphasis on the notion of life, because their first principles, whether water or air or the unbound and indefinite first principle, or later with Empedocles, the four elements, they were all meant to be alive from the very beginning. And this is something that we need to bear in mind. Now, there is a pre-Socratic, so-called pre-Socratic philosopher, namely Anaxagoras, who, in the 5th century, who was the first to introduce the notion of a cosmic intellect. And what is important, and what I want to emphasize, is that this notion of a nous, of an intellect, is a notion that applies in Anaxagoras philosophy, especially to all kinds of living entities. Because Anaxagoras, in a fragment, himself says that all things that are ensouled, namely all living things, have a share in intelligence, in nous. And here, we are already in the 5th century in front of an explicit idea that actually ascribes intelligence to all life forms. After that, we have the great kind of philosophical work of Plato, and I would like to say just a couple of things about his natural philosophy as described in the Timaeus. The idea is that Plato presents in that dialogue is that there is an archetype or a paradigm of eternal, immovable forms, and there is also, on the other hand, an eternal space or matter plus space. And then there is a craftsman, a divine craftsman, who wants to, so to speak, to bring the paradigm in extended material forms. And he does that with the creation of a world soul, a soul that will be the soul of the entire physical universe. And then he creates the souls of the different species of animals, including inferior gods. So here, in this narrative, we have the idea of a world soul, that the whole universe itself is alive, which resonates with things that not the literal sense of being alive, with things that we listened to yesterday afternoon. And we have also the idea that there is a world soul that, so to speak, brings together all individual souls, and that the unity of the universe in a certain way is a unity of life. And now I will introduce Aristotle by saying Aristotle is the person, the philosopher, who was obsessed, in a way, if I may put it this way, with the idea of teleology. And he thought that everything is teleologically determined. And his view about nature is a view about an entity, not an entity, we'll see about that, that actually goes always for the good. And now I would like to ask Stasinos to tell us a bit more about Aristotle's conception of nature.
Okay, thank you, Spiro. Thank you for inviting me here. And I will say a few things here and there about Aristotle to somehow provoke a little bit of discussion as we go on. So I will be brief. One important element that Spiros referred to is that life is something that permeates the whole universe, and plants, animals, and human beings have something in common. By the way, this can help explaining the belief that some pre-Socratics and Plato probably had, that our souls transmigrate from one body to the next, maybe animal or maybe even plant. In the case of Empedocles, we have a report that he remembered his previous life, in one of which he was a plant, indeed. But anyway, one important thing that Aristotle picks up from this tradition is the fact that life is something positive as opposed to its opposite. So with the concept of life, the concept of a value of something good to be achieved is on the table, as it were. And the next thing, which is important, is that for Aristotle, in order to understand the activities and behavior and development of living beings, we have to look not in the process that produced it, as indeed previous thinkers have attempted to do, but to look at the finished product, at the mature organism, because that's where the whole development leads. One important principle for inquiring into the animal world and the development and behavior of animals is exactly the idea that nature does nothing in vain, or that nature does the best of all possibilities. This gives to Aristotle a heuristic device in order to understand why animals and plants have the very organs they do. I want to read a small excerpt from the Incessu Animalium, a work of Aristotle that is devoted to explaining the way animals use their limbs in order to move. Because this is an opportunity to read, a few lines of Aristotle here in the Lyceum. It's worth mentioning that when Aristotle, this excerpt concerns a low, rather, natural species, snakes. Okay, and before reading it, I want to stress that Aristotle underlines the importance of studying the living world, because animals are very close to us and we can have accurate knowledge of them. So for the lover of wisdom, the study of animals and plants, it's hugely important for Aristotle. So what he has to say about snakes, and in the course of talking about why they don't have limbs, he uses and states the very principle that nature does nothing in vain, is this. The reason why snakes are footless is first that nature creates nothing without a purpose, but always with a view to what is best for each thing within the bounds of possibility, preserving the particular essence and purpose of each. And secondly, as we have already seen, because no blooded animal can move by means of more than 4 points. So blooded animals need 4 limbs at least in order to manage the 4 points of movement, front and rear, left and right. It is clear from this, and here comes the conclusion, that all blooded animals whose length is out of proportion, like the snakes, in the rest of the bodily constitution can move, like the snakes, can move without having feet. But they cannot have more than 4, for if they had, they would be bloodless, whereas if they had 2 or 4, they would be practically unable to move. So the principle in this explanation is in order to limit down the possibilities and explain why it's better for snakes not to have feet at all, because otherwise, with only 4 feet, they would be very slow. So this is an example of using the principle. I want to add one more thing, but before passing on, that we talk about ancestral intelligence, and it's very important that Aristotle creates for the first time a method that is still with us. And the method says that if you study, research in whatever field, the first thing you need to do is record the views of the predecessors. So the intelligence that comes before you is something you have to deal with, somehow classify the different views, see what they can explain well, and what is left unresolved. And only once you have this type of summary in front of you can you start trying to propose your new ideas or solutions to the problem. So maybe we can talk about that, but as important is Aristotle for biology, equally important he is for this method of using ancestral intelligence in order to progress in inquiry. So,
okay, so what you have said is that Aristotle is one of those systematic thinkers who actually takes the past, his predecessors, very seriously, and he thinks that only when we have gathered all the ideas that have been proposed in the past can we actually raise new questions and move forward. So this is the kind of ancestral intelligence that Aristotle already receives, right? But I would like also, before we move on to Stoicism, I would like to say just one thing about Aristotle's notion of nature. Nature is an internal principle of change and rest in a non-accidental way, he says, and the nature is the nature of particular life forms, of the particular species, as well as nature globally. And we have in Aristotle the notion of a pneuma in the biological works, namely something like a wind that permeates all living things, and this kind of substance is in a certain way the cause of their being alive, and it relates to the fifth element. And with this idea, the idea of pneuma, we may move forward to Stoicism and ask Evangelos about the idea of animate intelligence and cosmic intelligence in Stoicism.
Thank you, Spiros. Let me start by saying how pleased I am to be in this company, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm also very proud that the Applied Philosophy Research Laboratory is one of the academic partners of this event. For this, thank you, Evangelos. I'll follow up on what Stasinos mentioned. I'm not an expert in Aristotle, neither on Stoics, but we're all aware of that Aristotle's universe comprises, or rather consists in unique proper ends, unique goals, unique purposes. We have separate beings that strive to fulfill their purpose, to achieve their proper end. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Stasina. With the emergence of the school of the Stoics, we have a paradigm shift, a transition to another type of universe. The Stoics, and I'll try to be brief to leave room for Q&As, and also for further mentions by Spiros as well. To the Stoics, the good created the universe only to reside within it, in the form of fire, pyr. It's a concept they inherited from Heraclitus, but the Stoic version of pyr is not physical fire, it's a divine fire that permeates all creation, the universe, the cosmos, and unifies it. So in that sense, everything that comprises the cosmos. The word cosmos in Greek means an ordered whole, but also an ornament. And this gives us the idea the Greeks had for an ornament. It had to be ordered, not the other way around. So while in Aristotle we have a hierarchically ordered universe, beings that do exist because of something else. When it comes to the Stoics, the universe becomes a unified whole. And what unifies it is this concept of the peer, this divine peer that resides in every being and makes all beings, in a sense, relative, familiar to each other. So the main concept here is sympathia. Sympathia is sympathy in English. Sympathia means that we are all, in a sense, interrelated, interconnected. I should mention here, try to be brief because the clock is ticking, that Posidonius went in great troubles to visit Cadiz in Spain because, you know, Mediterranean is landlocked, so there are no tides and ebb tides, dramatic ones at least. Here, he went to Cadiz to study the tides and ebb tides as related to the phases of the moon. Because the moon, everything that our cosmos consists in are interrelated to each other. This is the notion of sympathia, and its moral equivalent is the notion of ikiosis. It makes sense to feel close to, in of course, overlapping circles, to other beings that comprise the universe. So this transition is crucial. It wasn't meant to become dominant, but it re-emerged recently, I would say, and maybe we could follow up on this later. This is it.
Okay, so in a way, with the Stoics, we come full circle back to Heraclitus, who was the one who said that there is a common logos, a common rationality, or a common reason. And this is a principle of the universe itself. And to the extent that we share in that common logos, we flourish. To the extent that we deviate from that common logos and we think that rationality or thinking is our own private property or our own private quality, then we are alienated from the whole. So the idea that we would like to actually put forward was that in Greek philosophy, from the pre-Socratics down to the Hellenistic, to the Stoics, there are variations of a certain theme, namely the interconnectedness of the many parts into a whole, which is arranged, a principle of unity in nature. And the important thing in Aristotle, and the motto with which we began this panel, nature does nothing in vain, is that in Aristotle we do have teleology without a creator God, without a craftsman, for instance, as in Plato, or perhaps even earlier on Anaxagoras. So the idea is that nature itself, without deliberating, makes the best choices. And Aristotle has an argument in favor of that view. He says that even we ourselves do not deliberate when we possess craftsmanship. What he means is things like, take an example, the example of driving a car. The more you are able to drive a car, the less you have to think about your choice. The whole thing becomes automated, so to speak, with you. So nature doesn't deliberate and achieves the end through that internal principle reaching goals. And this is something that we may perhaps want to rescue in this conflict between lack of teleology in nature as opposed to those who think that there is creationism, namely a God who has made everything. Aristotle has a middle course, neither a creator God nor a lack of teleology. The good is intrinsic, and this brings us back to the idea also of human flourishing. The human flourishing is a kind of flourishing that has to do with the full development, as Angie Hobbs has told us earlier, the full development of our human nature. And full development means from the lower parts to the higher parts, including the reasoning and deliberating parts. So Aristotle's natural teleology has also consequences in ethics and politics, and to a certain extent, he wants to stress that by following up and understanding nature as a whole and our own human nature, may we, as communities and as individuals, flourish. Okay. The time is over. Would you like to say a concluding word? Okay, so nature does nothing in vain. Let's think about it. Thank you.